The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. Outside the small house nestled between pines on the outskirts of Ashland, Oregon, gray clouds blanketed the morning sky. Drops of water clung to the windowpane in delicate rivulets. Inside, Anna Carter moved quietly across the kitchen floor, the steam from her teacup rising like a soft breath against the chill. She glanced over at the man sitting on the worn leather couch, his face tilted toward the sound of her footsteps. Daniel. Her husband of 7 years, a once-renowned jazz pianist who had lost his sight in a car accident 5 years ago. Since then, Anna's world had folded inward, shrinking from galleries and classrooms to the quiet corners of their home, where she had become his eyes, his hands, his rhythm. She placed the tea gently on the coffee table, nudging it an inch closer to his hand than usual. A silent test. Daniel reached for it almost immediately, fingers landing perfectly on the handle. Thanks, love, he said without hesitation.
Anna hésitated for juste un moment.
Of course. He took a sip, then leaned back, sighing contentedly. Anna watched the motion, her stomach twisting just slightly. 4 weeks now, there had been small things, too small to call lies, but too precise to be coincidence. Like how he seemed to know when she walked into a room. Or how he stepped over the cat's toy that had been left in the hallway, even though she hadn't told him it was there. She had brushed them off. Told herself she was being paranoid. But now, something had shifted. Last night, when she came home late from her sister's place, she found Daniel standing by the front window.
No canne, no hésitation.
Just standing, as if looking out into the dark, though his eyes were supposed to be blind. When she called his name, he flinched. Now, she watched as he lifted the cup again, still perfectly aligned with his mouth. She said nothing, just turned and walked back to the kitchen. Their house had once been filled with music. Daniel used to play for hours. After the accident, he stopped completely. The piano in the corner was covered now with a thin layer of dust and silence. Anna dusted it every week, but never touched the keys. They felt too sacred, too silent. That morning, she left for the store early. While Daniel stayed back, he never joined her on errands anymore. She bought groceries and a small motion sensor camera. It was an impulsive decision, made between the cereal aisle and the self-checkout lane. Her hands trembled as she paid for it. Back home, she installed the device discreetly in the living room, angled toward the hallway and couch. It was small, barely noticeable, hidden between a row of framed photos from happier years. That night, Daniel went to bed early. Anna stayed on the couch, pretending to read. She watched the hallway where he had disappeared, her heart pulsing loudly in her ears. When she was sure he had fallen asleep, she slipped the memory card from the camera, inserted it into her laptop, and hit play. At first, the footage was uneventful.
Just the dimly living room and the stillness of midnight.
But at 2:04 a.m., the bedroom door opened.
Daniel stepped out. No canne. No outstretched hand.
He moved with confidence, walking straight into the kitchen, turning on the faucet, pouring himself a glass of water. Anna froze. She watched him open the fridge, take out a container, inspect its contents, and return it. Then, he opened the front door slightly and looked out into the night. Looked. Her breath caught. When he pulled his phone from his pocket and started typing, her hands covered her mouth. On the screen, she saw the reflection of the light on his glasses, the way his fingers danced across the screen without error. He could see. The recording ended with him returning to bed, calm and composed.
Anna sat in silence for a long time after.
Her tea had long gone cold. Her body felt numb. What did it mean? Was it a miracle he hadn't told her about? Was he hiding his recovery? Or had he never really lost his sight? The questions hit like thunderclaps, one after another, each louder than the last. She wanted to scream, to shake him awake, to demand answers. But she didn't. She simply walked to the guest room, closed the door behind her, and lay on the bed in her clothes, staring at the ceiling until morning bled through the blinds. The next day, Daniel greeted her with a kiss on the forehead. "You didn't come to bed," he said softly. "I didn't feel well," she replied, eyes fixed on the window. He nodded, sat down, and turned on the old radio they kept by the table. Jazz filled the room, a smooth, slow tune that once would have made her smile. But now, all she could hear was deception in every note. She looked at him again. At the man she'd once loved without condition, whom she'd cared for with every ounce of herself. And now, she wasn't even sure who he was anymore. It was a Thursday when Anna decided to test her suspicions again. Daniel was in the backyard, sitting on the bench under their maple tree pretending, at least she believed it was pretending, to soak in the warmth of the afternoon sun. The newspaper she left on the kitchen counter that morning had been moved. Folded neatly, slightly askew, as if someone had browsed it. She hadn't touched it. He had. Back in the kitchen, Anna filled a glass of water, this time placing it on the far side of the counter, out of reach, a subtle shift from its usual spot. Then, she waited. Watched. 15 minutes later, Daniel walked inside. He made no sound when he entered, but Anna was alert now.
Every step, every movement rend like a bell.
He walked directly to the counter, didn't feel around with his hands, didn't hesitate. His fingers wrapped around the glass immediately. He drank, then rinsed it at the sink. Anna felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't muscle memory. This was vision. When he turned to speak to her, she had to force her expression into something resembling calm. "Did you pick up the mail?" he asked. "I haven't been out," she replied, folding a dish towel with slow deliberation. He nodded. "I thought I heard the truck." "You might have." He turned back toward the living room and Anna caught the flicker. His eyes scanned the floor briefly, catching sight of the shoes she had deliberately kicked out of place. He avoided them without stumbling. The truth was no longer hiding. It was screaming. That night, as Daniel slept, Anna retrieved the memory card from the camera again. She hadn't reviewed the footage from the previous night. Her fingers trembled slightly as she slotted the card into her laptop and pressed play. At 1:32 a.m., Daniel emerged from the bedroom. Same fluidity in movement. This time, he wasn't just wandering the house. He sat at the desk in the study, the one Anna thought he hadn't used in years. He opened the drawer, took out a small notebook, and wrote something. Anna leaned in, narrowing her eyes. The handwriting was steady.
Familiar.
Not the scribbles of a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to use pen and paper. Then came the phone. He dialed. Waited. A voice on the other end picked up, but the microphone didn't catch the words. Daniel spoke quietly. "I told you not to text after midnight. It's too risky. She's starting to notice things." There was a pause. "No, I'm handling it. She still thinks I'm blind." Anna's hand flew to her mouth.
"Yellel see you Monday."
"Same place," he said, and hung up. The silence after that was deafening. She didn't sleep that night. By Saturday morning, Anna was sitting in her car, parked across from a cafe 2 towns over. She had followed Daniel's phone GPS, synced quietly to her laptop months ago when he started spending more time alone. She hadn't thought she'd use it. Not really. But today, it pulsed on her screen, a blue dot inching toward a small building called the Hollow Bean Cafe. At 10:08 a.m., Daniel arrived. He walked from the parking lot like any other man, not blind, not hesitant. Confident, dressed in the navy peacoat she had bought him last Christmas. The one she hadn't seen in weeks. At 10:12 a.m., a woman entered the cafe and approached his table. Early 30s. Shoulder-length auburn hair. Wearing a grey wool coat and a soft, polished smile.
Anna sat sank.
She didn't recognize the woman. Not exactly. But the way Daniel stood to greet her, the way his hand brushed her elbow before they sat, it was intimacy.
Note of stranger. Note professionnelle.
They laughed.
Anaïs briscogt.
It wasn't the laugh itself but the sound, the one Daniel hadn't made with her in a long, long time. She took out her phone, snapped a photo of the pair through the cafe window, hands clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. And yet, she didn't move. Didn't burst in. Didn't scream. She just sat there, watching a version of her husband she no longer knew. When she returned home, the house felt different. Not colder, not emptier, just false. Like a stage set for a play that had already ended. Daniel was in the kitchen, frying eggs. She watched him crack one into the pan, the yolk landing perfectly intact. "I didn't hear you come in," he said. "I was out," she replied. "For groceries?" "No." He turned to look toward her, still pretending, still blind.
"Where did you go?"
Anna didn't answer. She placed her keys on the counter, took off her coat, and walked past him without another word. She needed space. That night, after dinner, quiet, tense, Daniel retreated to his studio. Anna opened the laptop again and stared at the photo she had taken at the cafe. They weren't touching. Not in the photo. But their faces said everything.
Confort. Familiarity.
Connection. She closed the file. Then opened another. A document Daniel had saved to the family folder. She scrolled through financial statements until something caught her eye, a new insurance policy, listed under Daniel's name. Dated just 2 weeks after his supposed accident.
Payout, $250,000.
For permanent disability. Her breath hitched. The beneficiary? Himself. The air around her thinned. Her heart pounded. This wasn't just about a lie. This was about control. About money. About trust. Everything she had sacrificed, her career, her art, her independence, suddenly felt like bricks added to a prison she hadn't realized she was building with her own hands. She closed the laptop. Got up. Walked to the bedroom and stood at the doorway, watching Daniel's silhouette through the cracked door of the studio. He was playing the piano. Softly. A melody she hadn't heard in years. Her favorite. The same song he had written for her on their wedding day. And it broke her heart. Because now she knew, he hadn't just stopped playing after the accident. He had chosen not to play. Just like he had chosen to blindfold himself with a lie. Anna didn't sleep that night. She lay on the guest bed, staring at the cracks in the ceiling as Daniel's music drifted faintly from the studio. The melody had once wrapped around her like a second skin, now it scraped against her nerves. Every note was a reminder of what had been taken, not by fate, but by choice. By morning, she was no longer just heartbroken. She was angry. She found him in the kitchen, preparing coffee. The smell filled the room, warm and familiar, but it only deepened the ache in her chest. "Morning," Daniel said, his voice smooth, as if nothing in the world had changed. Anna sat at the table, arms crossed. "We need to talk." Daniel froze for a fraction of a second. Just enough for her to notice. "Of course," he replied, his smile forced, tentative. "What about?" She looked at him directly, her voice level.
Yor Zeit. A bit of silence.
Then he laughed, a little too quickly. "Still not there, unfortunately. But hey, at least I've got a good sense of hearing." She didn't smile. Didn't blink. "I saw you," she said. Daniel's shoulders tensed. "What do you mean?" "At the cafe. With her." The air shifted. The casualness drained from his face. Slowly, Daniel lowered the coffee pot onto the counter and turned toward her, mouth slightly open.
Anna.
She cut him off.
Don't lie to me.
"Not anymore. I followed you. I saw you walk. I saw you laugh. I saw you look straight into her eyes." Daniel looked down, pressing his fingers against the edge of the counter. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "You weren't supposed to see that." "No," she said. "I wasn't. Just like I wasn't supposed to question you. Or doubt you. Or realize that you've been pretending to be blind for 5 years." Daniel winced as if she'd slapped him. "I never meant to hurt you." "You didn't think you would?" Her voice cracked with disbelief. "You made me give up my career.
My indépendance.
I lived in this house as your nurse, your caretaker, your shadow. And you let me." "It wasn't like that," Daniel said. "It started out different." Anna stood now, pacing. "Then tell me. Tell me exactly how a man lies to his wife for 5 years and still thinks it started with good intentions." He sighed. "After the accident, the doctors said there was nerve damage. They said the blindness might be temporary. I was scared. You were crying every night. I didn't know how to be the man you needed." "So you faked it?" she snapped. "I thought it would pass," he said, his voice rising. "At first. And then you stayed. You took care of me. You looked at me like I still mattered. And I realized for the first time in years that I had you fully. That I wasn't losing you." Anna stared at him, stunned. "So you pretended to be blind to keep me?" Daniel looked away. "Yes." The word landed like a weight in the middle of the room. "I didn't know how else to hold on to you," he whispered. Anna's jaw clenched. Then you never really trusted me. I didn't trust anything, Daniel said, his eyes glistening. My mother left when I was 10. She walked out in the middle of the night and never came back. I woke up to a quiet house and my father blaming me. Ever since then, I've lived in fear that the people I love will disappear. So you tried to control me, Anna said. And when I didn't leave, you just tightened your grip. I loved you, he said. No, she replied, voice firm. You wanted to be loved by someone who couldn't leave. That's not the same thing. The silence that followed stretched on and on. Finally, Daniel sat down across from her. I know you can't forgive me, he said. I'm not asking you to. But I need you to understand, it wasn't all manipulation. There were days I hated myself for lying. For keeping you in a world that wasn't yours to carry. Anna's eyes filled with tears. Not because of his words, but because she knew deep down that he was telling the truth. And it hurt more than any lie. I lost something too, she said. 3 months after your accident, I had a miscarriage.
He never told you.
I was scared you wouldn't survive another loss. I carried that pain alone, because I believed I was protecting you.
Daniel's face pâlide.
His lips parted, but no words came. I made sacrifices too, she continued, voice trembling. Not because I had to, but because I loved you. And I thought you were fighting as hard as I was. Daniel reached across the table, his hand trembling.
Anna.
She pulled away. I need to leave, she said. No, he whispered. Please. Don't go. She shook her head, tears finally spilling. I'm not leaving because I stopped loving you.
I'm leaving because I need to love myself again.
And I can't do that here, in this house built on secrets. Daniel bowed his head.
Where will you go?
I don't know yet, she said honestly. But I need space. To breathe. To figure out who I am without you. He nodded slowly, painfully. Anna stood, walked to the hallway, and paused by the door. I don't hate you, she said, not looking back. But I can't stay with someone who never believed I could choose to stay on my own. And with that, she left.
Left the house, the lies, the music.
Left the version of herself that had bent, folded, and disappeared for someone else's fear. Now for the first time in years, Anna Carter was walking into the unknown, without a script, without a mask, and without the weight of a lie disguised as love. The first night away from Daniel, Anna stayed in a modest Airbnb by the coast in Florence, Oregon. The room was simple, white walls, a clean bed, a small balcony overlooking the water. The crash of the waves was constant, steady, like a new kind of heartbeat to replace the one that had broken. She didn't cry that night. Not out of strength, but exhaustion. The next morning, she woke to sunlight bleeding through sheer curtains and the salty scent of the ocean. For the first time in years, no one was waiting on her. No voice calling her name. No footsteps to guide. She stood by the window, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, and breathed in deeply. She had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without bracing for impact. That day, she walked through town. She bought a cup of black coffee from a roadside stand and sat on a bench near the harbor, watching boats drift lazily across the bay. The air was cool and sharp. She didn't speak to anyone, didn't check her phone. She didn't need to. For now, she just needed to be. By the third day, she began to write. At first, it was just in her journal, scribbled thoughts, fragments of memories, questions she'd never dared ask herself. Then the words grew heavier. Longer. Stories formed on the page. Truths took shape. She wrote about silence, about sacrifice, about the quiet violence of loving someone who didn't trust you to stay. And somewhere between the pages, she began to find herself. Meanwhile, back in Ashland, Daniel sat alone in their once shared kitchen. He had removed the curtains that kept the room dim and let the morning light flood in. He no longer reached for cups in the practiced way of a blind man. He let the world see him now. Let himself be exposed. The music had stopped. The piano, once his place of escape, stood untouched. Instead, Daniel found himself reading. Slowly, yes. Painfully even. But he read the letters Anna had left behind. The journal entries she forgot to erase from her computer. He read her pain. And for the first time, he allowed himself to feel the weight of what he'd done. On the fourth night alone, Daniel returned to therapy. Rachel didn't smile when he walked in. She simply gestured to the chair, her posture upright, her gaze direct. "How long are you planning to keep punishing yourself?" she asked. Daniel looked down. "Maybe until I deserve less pain." "You don't need punishment," she said. "You need truth."
From yourself, first.
Then from her. "I told her everything," he said.
No, Rachel replied calmly.
You confessed.
"That's different." Daniel leaned back in his seat. "I didn't mean to lose her." Rachel nodded. "Then you'll need to rebuild something. Not to get her back, but to become someone she'd want to return to." Daniel didn't speak. He just nodded. Back in Florence, Anna received a message.
A voice recording.
She hesitated before pressing play. Daniel's voice was quieter than she remembered. "Hey. I know you asked for space. I'm not trying to take that from you. I wanted to let you know I'm still here. I'm not doing it to guilt you. Or to pull you back. I'm just trying to become someone who doesn't need to pretend anymore." She listened to the message twice. Then she deleted it, not out of anger, but because she didn't need to carry his words right now. She needed to carry her own. Anna began volunteering at a small community art center. The coordinator, a retired artist named Marla, welcomed her with a quiet warmth. They organized painting classes for children, elderly residents, and trauma survivors. On her second week, Marla handed Anna a brush and said, "You don't just teach art here, dear. You heal with it." Anna smiled. She hadn't touched a brush in 3 years. That night, she painted. The canvas began blank, then slowly bloomed with color, swirls of blue and gray and streaks of crimson. It wasn't beautiful. It was raw, honest. And it was hers. For the first time in years, her hands shook from creation, not containment. Weeks passed.
Daniel sans no more message.
Anna checked in with her sister. Once. She didn't mention Daniel. Just said she was okay. One day, while organizing old canvases in the art center, Marla approached her. "You ever think about going back?" she asked gently. Anna didn't answer right away. "I don't know if there's a back anymore," she finally said. "I think I'm only just getting to forward." Marla smiled. "That's fair. But when people change, places can too." That night, Anna opened her journal again. This time, her entry was short. "If I ever return, it won't be to the man he was. And it won't be as the woman I used to be. We'll both have to meet each other as strangers, because only then can we see clearly." She paused. And under those lines, she wrote, "I'm not done loving him. But I'm not done becoming me either." Daniel stopped looking at the front door after the 3rd week. He no longer checked the window at dusk or left the porch light on. At some point, he understood that if Anna ever returned, it wouldn't be because he waited, it would be because she wanted to. And wanting was something he had tried to control for far too long. Now, his days were quieter, stripped of illusions. He cooked his own meals, poorly at first. He began driving again, slowly and only in town. He stopped telling people he was blind. He stopped telling himself he wasn't broken. The hardest part wasn't being alone. It was facing the version of himself that had watched the woman he loved disappear and done nothing to stop it except cling harder. He started journaling, at Rachel's suggestion. His first entry was only one sentence. "I don't know who I am when I'm not pretending." By the end of the first week, he had filled 20 pages. He also started returning to music. Not the old songs, those were tethered too tightly to Anna. Instead, he tried new melodies, unfamiliar scales. The music didn't flow at first. It creaked, stuttered. But eventually, it moved. So did he. On the 5th Sunday since Anna left, Daniel visited a local bookstore. He hadn't stepped inside in years, not since before the accident. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. The scent of ink and paper wrapped around him like a long-forgotten friend. He walked to the back, toward the section Anna had always loved, memoir, essays, stories of becoming. He ran his fingers along the spines without picking one up. Then he saw it. A small flyer pinned to the corkboard by the exit. Reading night at the Firehouse Cafe, featuring local writers. Thursday at 6 p.m. One of the names stood out.
Anna Carter.
His breath caught. He stared at the flyer for a long time, reading her name over and over as if to prove it wasn't a dream. He didn't go home immediately. He stood in the parking lot for several minutes, heart pounding in his ears. Then, without fully thinking it through, he drove back to the house, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the clock. 3 days until Thursday. 3 days to decide. Anna didn't know he'd be there. She had signed up for the open mic on a whim. Marla had nudged her gently for weeks. You don't have to bear it all, she said.
Juste neuf to feel your voice again.
So she printed out 3 pages from her journal. Nothing dramatic, nothing explosive, just quiet truths, the kind that had taken her years to write and weeks to admit. She arrived early, the cafe warm with the smell of cinnamon and old wood. Locals filled the space quickly, retirees, students, aspiring poets. Marla waved from a corner table. Anna's palms were sweating. When her name was called, she stepped to the front slowly, fingers gripping the paper like an anchor. She read. There's a particular silence that comes from loving someone who doesn't believe they're lovable.
It fills the room, like smoke.
You keep waving it away, thinking if you're kind enough, patient enough, still enough, it'll clear. But it doesn't. It lingers.
Until one day, you realize you're not breathing anymore.
The room was still. She continued. Leaving isn't always about not loving someone. Sometimes it's the only way to love yourself enough to survive. When she finished, there was soft applause. A few nods.
Marla beamed.
But Anna didn't notice any of them. She saw him. Sitting near the back, half in shadow. Daniel.
She froze for a moment. Her heart beat faltered.
He didn't move. Didn't wave. Just sat, watching, eyes steady and unsure. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and walked off the stage. Afterward, he didn't approach her. He waited until the crowd thinned. Then, cautiously, he stepped forward. Hi, he said softly. She turned. Her expression was unreadable. You came. I saw your name on a flyer, he said. I didn't know if I should. She didn't speak. He swallowed. You were amazing. Thank you. A pause. You look good, he said, fumbling slightly. I feel more like myself now, she replied. I didn't realize how far I'd drifted. Daniel nodded. I know. I see it now. I'm sorry. I didn't read that for you, she said. I know, he replied. But I heard it. And I needed to.
Another pause.
I didn't come to ask anything of you, he added. I just wanted you to know, I've been working on myself.
Note for a réunion. For rédemption.
I still have a long way to go. Anna looked at him closely. There was no pretense in his face.
No desperation.
Just truth. Unvarnished and hard-earned. I'm glad, she said at last. He nodded, turned slightly as if to leave, then paused. Do you want to have coffee sometime? He asked, gently. Anna considered it. Then smiled faintly. Not yet, she said. But maybe someday. When I know it's not the old story repeating itself. I'd like that, he said. They stood there for a moment longer, 2 people who had shared everything and lost everything, and perhaps, just maybe, were beginning to understand what it meant to start over.
Note à l'envers.
Not yet. But as strangers meeting again, for the very first time. 2 weeks passed before Anna heard from Daniel again. He didn't call. He didn't text. Instead, he sent a handwritten letter, 4 pages of careful cursive in a simple envelope, no return address. It arrived at the art center, tucked between donation flyers and community notices. Marla handed it to her with a knowing look. Anna opened it alone, in her small apartment, sitting by the window as the late spring rain tapped against the glass. She didn't read it all at once. She let the first sentence settle. I'm learning how to live without the need to be needed. She read the letter 3 times. In it, Daniel didn't ask for anything. He didn't promise change. He simply told her what his days looked like now, how he spent his mornings journaling, how he'd started teaching a free music class for teenagers at the local library, how he made lasagna from scratch and burned it twice but still ate it anyway. I still miss you, he wrote. But I miss the person I was with you even more. And I'm learning that he can still exist, even if you're not beside him. Anna folded the letter and set it on her bookshelf. She didn't write back. Not because she didn't care, but because she was still becoming. May rolled into June.
The coastal wind warmed, and the Arcenteres summer session grès-au-busier.
Anna found herself surrounded by children's laughter, the smell of tempera paint, and the soft hum of healing that art brought in its quiet way. She no longer thought about Daniel every hour. Sometimes, an entire day would pass without his name brushing against her mind. Other days, he came to her like a memory, familiar, tender, no longer sharp-edged. One afternoon, while walking along the shore after class, she saw a father helping his daughter fly a kite. The little girl shrieked with joy as the fabric soared into the sky. The father laughed, head thrown back, completely present. That laugh reminded Anna of a younger Daniel. A version of him before fear swallowed his joy. She stood watching them for several minutes. Later that night, she painted the scene. Not the people but the feeling, the open sky, the arc of the wind, the tiny speck of red that danced freely above it all. Back in Ashland, Daniel was also learning to breathe differently. His music class had become more than a project. It was a lifeline. The kids were wild and messy and filled with questions that forced him to stay honest. They didn't care about his past. They didn't know he once faked blindness. To them, he was just Mr. Carter, the guy who played jazz like it was made of sunlight. One of the students, a 17-year-old named Luis, asked him after class, "Did you ever lose someone you loved?" Daniel paused. "Yes," he said. "But I found myself because of it." Luis nodded like he understood, even if he didn't yet. Daniel walked home slowly that evening, his hands tucked into his pockets, head tilted toward the dimming sky. It felt good to answer truthfully. It felt better not to flinch when the truth hit back. That night, he sat at the piano and composed again. Not a sad song. Something playful. Light. He didn't record it. He just played. Anna's art show was scheduled for mid-July. It wasn't big, just a small community exhibit at a gallery cafe downtown. She had debated pulling out at the last minute. Not because she wasn't ready, but because part of her still feared being seen. But on the evening of the opening she dressed simply, a light blue blouse, hair tucked behind her ears, and stood in front of her work like it belonged to someone else. Marla stood beside her. "You proud?" she asked. Anna smiled, eyes on the painting of the kite. "I'm surprised." "By what?" "That I don't feel like I'm hiding anymore." Marla nodded. "That's what art does. It reveals who we are when we're too scared to speak." The crowd was small but warm. A few local artists, some curious townsfolk. And then, near the end of the evening, Anna saw a familiar figure by the door. Daniel. He wasn't holding flowers. He wasn't dressed in anything special. Just jeans, a dark gray shirt, and that quiet look he always wore when he wasn't sure if he was welcome. He didn't approach. Instead, he wandered the exhibit slowly, pausing in front of each piece. When he reached the kite painting, he stood a little longer. Anna walked over, heart steady. "You came," she said softly. He nodded. "I almost didn't." "Why did you?" "Because even if we never speak again, I wanted to see what you made from it all." She looked at him. He wasn't trying to explain. He wasn't seeking forgiveness. He was just witnessing her. "Thank you," she said. They stood together, silently, in front of the painting. "I used to think love was about staying no matter what," Anna said. "But I've learned it's also about leaving when you lose yourself. And returning only when you found the person you were meant to be." Daniel turned to her, eyes soft. "Do you think I've found that person?" "I think you're becoming him," she said. "Just like I'm becoming me." He smiled, not as a plea, but as a man who finally knew how to be still in the moment. "I don't expect anything," he said. "I know," she replied. "But if one day we wanted to start again," he added, "not where we left off but from here." Anna looked at him, then at her painting. "Then we'd have to start as strangers," she said. "People who meet without the weight of what came before." Daniel nodded. "I think I could do that," he said. She looked at him fully now. "Maybe not today," she said. "But maybe someday," he whispered. They didn't touch. They didn't promise. They simply stood there. Two people who had loved, hurt, grown, and now finally understood the kind of love that doesn't demand, doesn't bind, but offers space to grow, separately and together. Summer in Florence drifted in slowly, like the tide. The art center grew quieter after the exhibit. Tourists came and went, children returned to school, and the days stretched longer, warmer. Anna kept painting, but not with the urgency of healing. This time, she painted for the silence it brought, an internal stillness she hadn't known in years. She hadn't seen Daniel since the gallery. They hadn't exchanged messages. No promises, no plans. But something about that night, standing beside him as two people who had shed their old skins, left a door ajar between them. Not wide enough for expectations, but just enough for possibility. And possibility, Anna had learned, was more powerful than certainty. In Ashland, Daniel kept showing up to the music classes. Luis, the 17-year-old with too many scars and not enough patience, had started bringing his little sister along. She was only 9, and she didn't speak much. But when Daniel handed her a set of drumsticks and a snare pad, her eyes lit up. She didn't need words. She had rhythm. Daniel stayed late after most classes, playing alone, writing pieces that didn't beg for attention. Pieces that existed for no one but him. And yet, Anna was in every note. Not in the way she had been before, like a ghost haunting his melodies, but now as something more grounded. A compass. One evening, after packing up, he found a small envelope slipped under the door of the library classroom. No name, just handwriting he didn't recognize. Inside was a note. "She's doing better now. Thank you for not giving up on her." It was from Luis. Daniel folded the note and placed it inside his wallet. That night, he didn't go straight home. He drove to the bluff that overlooked the valley, where he and Anna had once watched meteor showers wrapped in a single blanket. He sat on the hood of his car, wind tugging at his sleeves. He didn't cry. But he missed her in a way that didn't ache anymore.
It just existed.
Like the wind.
Like gravity.
Then came the email. It arrived late on a Monday night. Anna had just finished cleaning her brushes when she opened her laptop to check on the center's registration portal. Amid the clutter of newsletter sign-ups and donation receipts, she saw a name she hadn't thought about in years. Claire Redding. Her college roommate. The one who had known Anna before Daniel, before the accident, before the unraveling. The subject line read, "I saw your name in the gallery promo. I think we need to talk." Anna stared at the screen for a long time before clicking open.
Claire's message was brief.
Polite. But it included one sentence that chilled her. "I know what really happened the night of Daniel's accident." Anna blinked. Her stomach turned slowly, like a gear long rusted in place. She reread the line over and over again. Claire had been in town when it happened. They hadn't spoken in over 5 years. She had left abruptly after a falling out Anna had buried under too many apologies left unsent. "I have something to tell you," Claire wrote. "It's about Rachel." Anna's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She didn't want this. Didn't want to unearth another layer of what-ifs and maybes. But something deeper, instinctual, undeniable, told her that truth, once glimpsed, cannot be ignored. She replied with one sentence. "When and where?" They met at a small cafe off Highway 101, tucked behind a gas station and a line of rust-colored pines. Claire looked older, sharper around the eyes, but her voice was the same. They sat outside. The air smelled of salt and rain. "I didn't come to stir things," Claire began. Anna nodded. "Then why now?"
Claire hésitated.
"Because I thought you knew. I assumed Daniel told you." "Told me what?" Claire exhaled slowly. "I was at Rachel's apartment the night before Daniel's accident. She was drunk. Angry. She told me he'd threatened to leave her if she didn't back off. Said she was just a friend. But it wasn't just that. She said he was spiraling. That he'd made bad investments. That he couldn't pay the mortgage." Anna's stomach tightened. What does that have to do with the accident?
Claire met her eyes.
She said he'd talked about staging something.
Nothing concrete.
Just enough to start over.
Get sympathy.
Insurance.
A clean slate.
Anna's heart thudded. "No one could prove it," Claire added quickly. "And I didn't think he'd actually do it. But when I heard about the crash, and how the blindness was so convenient." Anna's hands were cold. But Rachel was his therapist, she said, barely above a whisper. Claire looked away. I don't think she was licensed then. Maybe not even now.
The café's wind chime jingled above them, too soft, too cheerful.
Anna stood abruptly. Thank you, she said. Claire nodded, eyes filled with something between regret and worry. Be careful, she said. Sometimes closure opens the wrong doors. Anna didn't reply. She just left. That night, Anna didn't sleep. She paced her apartment, the wind outside howling like something lost. Had Daniel lied about more than just his sight? Had he played her not just out of fear, but with calculation? Was the man she almost forgave still hiding parts of himself? She pulled out his letter. Read it again. And again. The words didn't change. But now, they trembled under the weight of what she didn't know. At 3:11 a.m., she sat at her kitchen table, pen in hand. She began writing, not to Daniel, not to Claire, but to herself. I don't know where this path leads. But I know I deserve to walk it without second-guessing every shadow. She paused. Then added. If he wants to meet me again, as a stranger, then he will have to bring everything. Not just the parts he wants me to see. She closed the notebook. Outside, the wind pressed against the glass like a question waiting to be answered. 3 days after the meeting with Claire, Anna found herself driving back to Ashland. The highway curved through dense woods, the trees leaning in as though to listen. She kept the windows up, silence wrapping around her like a second skin. There was no music.
No distraction.
Only the low hum of the engine and the quiet, rising pulse of something inevitable.
She didn't know exactly what she would say. Only that she couldn't carry the weight of half-truths any longer. Daniel answered the door before she even knocked. As if he had been waiting, not with hope, but with a quiet readiness. He looked different. Thinner. Less guarded. His eyes searched her face, but he didn't smile. Anna, he said softly. Can we talk? She asked. He stepped aside without a word. Inside, the house looked much the same, but the air felt different. Lighter, maybe. Or just emptier. She walked to the living room and sat on the couch. He remained standing for a moment, uncertain, then took the armchair across from her. The space between them felt heavier than distance. I saw Claire, Anna began.
Daniel blinked. Claire reading.
She told me about Rachel. And the night before your accident. Daniel's jaw tightened. He said nothing. She said you were spiraling. That Rachel told her you might have done something, planned something. He inhaled sharply through his nose. What exactly did she tell you? Anna didn't flinch. That you were desperate. That Rachel might not have been a real therapist. That the accident was more than it seemed. Daniel closed his eyes, his hands resting on his knees. She's not wrong, he said.
The word it like a dull blow.
Anna's throat tightened, but she held her voice steady. What does that mean, Daniel? He opened his eyes slowly, the pain in them raw and unfiltered. It means I didn't crash the car on purpose, he said. But I didn't stop it either. She stared at him. He continued, voice low, each word pulled from somewhere deep. I was behind on everything, mortgage, taxes, the music contracts were drying up. I felt like I was drowning.
Rachel, she knew.
She offered support, but it wasn't professional. It turned into something else.
Something blurred. Anna sat still, absorbing every word.
I didn't mean to lie at first. The doctors said the vision loss might be temporary. But when it didn't come back right away, and you started taking care of everything.
Il let it happen. Il let you believe.
He rubbed his eyes. And when I realized the blindness might not last, I panicked.
Because he knew if he told the truth, he'd lose you.
You'd see everything I'd been hiding. How broken I really was. You were never broken, Anna said, her voice cracking. You just didn't trust me to love you anyway. He looked at her.
You're right.
And that's what I've been trying to face. That my need to control everything destroyed the only honest thing I ever had. A long silence followed. Then Anna spoke again. Was there ever an insurance claim? Daniel nodded once. Yes. Disability. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either.
He never cached it.
The money's still in the account. She looked away, the ceiling blurring through the tears she wouldn't let fall. I came back because I needed to hear this from you, she said. Not from someone else. I needed to see if you could tell the truth without hiding behind guilt or excuses. I'm not proud of anything I've done, he said. But I won't lie to you again. Anna nodded slowly.
I believe that.
He exhaled, a tremor in his breath. But that doesn't mean we can go back, she added. I know. She stood. Daniel didn't move to stop her. At the door, she paused, hand on the frame. There's a version of you I loved so deeply it nearly erased me, she said. But there's a version of you now that I respect. And that means something too. He stood then, but kept his distance. If you ever want to meet that version again, he said, I'll be here. Not waiting, not expecting. Just, living honestly. She gave him one last look. It wasn't forgiveness. Not fully. But it was something close to peace. Then she walked out. Not with anger. Not with regret. But with the clarity that truth doesn't always lead to reunion. Sometimes, it simply sets us free. Back in Florence, Anna returned to the art center the next day. She didn't tell Marla what had happened. She didn't need to. Marla just handed her a fresh canvas and said, You look lighter. Anna smiled, the kind that came from somewhere earned. She picked up a brush. For the first time, she didn't paint the past.
She painted the ocean. Vast.
Moving. Unfinished. Like her. September came quietly to Florence. The mornings were cooler now. The air carried the scent of wood smoke and pine, and the sky turned a softer blue, like the season itself was learning how to let go. Anna had settled into a rhythm. Her days at the art center were full, her evenings calm. She painted more, wrote less. Not because the words had stopped, but because they no longer begged to be released like before. One afternoon, while cleaning the supply room, Marla found an old wooden frame tucked behind boxes of unused canvases. It was cracked along the bottom, but still sturdy. She handed it to Anna. Thought you might want to build something new into something old, she said. Anna took it without hesitation. She didn't know yet what she would place inside it. Daniel, back in Ashland, was learning how to live without Anna, not in absence, but in memory. She had become less of a wound and more of a presence. Quiet. Respected. He continued teaching. Luis's sister, Ellie, had started composing small drum routines. Daniel let her lead a session one Friday afternoon, and when she finished, she whispered, I think I want to be a music teacher someday. He didn't cry in front of her. But when the class ended and the library emptied out, he sat at the piano and played for an hour without stopping. It was the first time the music had felt whole. That night, he received an invitation. A local nonprofit was hosting a fundraiser gala, live performances, auctions, and guest speakers from the community. The email included his name on the list of honorees. He almost declined. But something told him not to. 2 weeks later, Anna received her own letter. Not from Daniel. Not from Marla. From the same non-profit. The Art Center had nominated her for a Creative Community Grant. Her work, especially with trauma recovery through art, had reached beyond Florence. They asked if she would attend the event and speak briefly about the importance of honest expression. At first, she hesitated. Not because of fear, but because she wasn't sure she belonged in a room full of applause yet. But then she remembered the cracked frame.
And the ocean painting still waiting for something to surround it.
She said yes. The gala was held in a renovated theater in Eugene. Soft lights, jazz playing from the balcony, rows of white chairs filled with donors and dreamers. Anna wore a simple black dress. Her hair curled gently over her shoulders, and for the first time in a long while, she felt entirely herself, not dressed up for someone else's eyes, but standing in her own quiet confidence. Daniel arrived later. He didn't know Anna would be there. When he saw her name in the program, something in his chest flickered. Not panic. Not longing. Recognition. She was on the list of speakers. He was on the list of honorees. He considered leaving, but didn't. Instead, he found a seat near the back, hands folded, eyes steady. Anna's name was called near the end. She walked to the stage, notes folded neatly in her palm, and stood behind the podium. The lights were soft, the audience hushed. I used to believe that art was something you offered to the world once it was beautiful, she began. But I've learned that the truest art comes when you're still broken.
Stealing.
She paused. A few years ago, I lost myself. Not all at once, but slowly, through silence, through sacrifice, through fear. And when I finally stepped away, I didn't know who I was anymore. She looked out at the crowd, but her eyes found only one face. Daniel. He didn't move. Didn't blink. She continued. It took walking away from everything I thought I needed to realize that the only thing worth building again was the truth. Not for anyone else, but for me. Soft applause rose as she stepped back. She bowed slightly, then walked off stage. She didn't look back. Later, as the crowd thinned and the jazz band packed their instruments, Anna stood alone near the exit, sipping water from a small glass. Daniel approached slowly. I didn't know you'd be here, he said. Neither did I, she replied. They stood in silence for a moment, the space between them no longer heavy, just open. You were extraordinary, he said. So were you, she said. Louise told me about your students. About Ellie.
Daniel Smiled, juste neuf.
I didn't know how to teach until I stopped trying to impress anyone. Anna nodded. That's how I learned to paint again. They both laughed, softly. Then Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to her. What is it? She asked. A song, he said. The first one I wrote that didn't have your name hidden in it. But somehow it's still about you. She took it, gently. Thank you. I don't expect anything, he added. I just wanted to give you something honest. She looked at the paper, then at him. I don't know what happens next, she said. I'm not sure either of us do. We don't have to, Daniel replied. That's the difference now. We're not rushing to rebuild.
Just, letting it breathe.
She smiled, the kind that lives in the corners of the mouth, soft and unfinished.
Let's see where the silence t'acquiesce.
He nodded. Then slowly, she reached out and touched his hand, briefly, gently, and then let go. They walked out of the building separately. But for the first time, their paths no longer felt broken. They felt parallel.
Like two melodies that could, someday, meet again.
In harmony. October arrived with gold on the trees and quiet in the air. The summer heat had faded, replaced by the gentle chill of early mornings. In Florence, the town began to prepare for its seasonal art walk, and the center bustled with volunteers. Anna stood in front of her largest canvas yet, layers of blue and green sweeping across its surface like tides that refused to settle. She had titled it, Returning. Not to a person, not to a place, but to herself. Marla walked in, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Still no frame? She asked.
Anna shook her head.
Not yet. It doesn't feel finished. Maybe it's not meant to be, Marla said. Some pieces just hang in waiting. Anna smiled. Maybe I'm still deciding what it means. They drank their coffee in silence, the kind of silence that didn't ask to be filled. Meanwhile, in Ashland, Daniel stood at the edge of the high school auditorium, clipboard in hand, watching his students run through final rehearsals for their fall performance. It wasn't a concert. It was a story, half spoken, half musical, written by the kids, based on the theme, What We Carry. He had guided, not led. Suggested, not corrected. And somehow, it had become beautiful. Louise had written a scene about forgiveness. Ellie had composed a short instrumental interlude titled Before the Storm. Daniel had simply listened. Encouraged. He had learned that leadership wasn't volume, but presence. That night, after the students left, he sat at the piano again. No sheet music. No plan. He played something soft.
Something open.
When he stopped, he felt a familiar stillness return, not emptiness but readiness. 2 weeks later, on a quiet Friday, Anna received a package.
No return address.
But she recognized the handwriting immediately. Inside was a small sanded wooden frame, the old one from the art center restored. And a note. I thought it deserved a second chance. Like we do. There was no signature. But none was needed. Anna stared at the frame for a long moment. Then she stood, walked to the canvas titled Returning, and for the first time, placed it gently inside. It fit perfectly. They met again in November. Not by coincidence, but not exactly by plan either. Anna had agreed to lead a workshop in Ashland, invited by the local arts council. Daniel had heard about it through the library, and rather than avoid the moment, he showed up, with no assumptions, just intention. She saw him in the back, listening quietly, his eyes never leaving her face. After the session, he waited until the last participant had gone before approaching her. "I didn't think you'd come," she said. "I didn't know if I should," he replied. "But I wanted to." They walked outside together, their breaths visible in the autumn air. "I liked what you said," he added, "about how healing isn't a return, but a continuation." "It's what I've learned," she said, "that you don't go back to who you were. You become someone new with what you've carried." He nodded, thoughtful. "So what are we now?" Anna looked at him, not searching for anything, just seeing. "I think we're two people who survived something we built wrong," she said. "And maybe now we get to build something better. Or maybe not. But whatever it is, it has to be honest." He didn't respond immediately. Just slipped his hands into his coat pockets, as if grounding himself in the moment. "I'd like that," he said finally. She smiled. "Then let's not decide anything tonight." "No promises," he agreed. "No timelines. Just time," she added. They walked for a while. Not touching. Not defining. Just sharing the same sidewalk, the same air, the same silence that now felt safe. And when they reached the corner where they would part ways, Daniel stopped.
Qu'est-ce something?
Anna turned to him.
What is it?
"When you painted that piece, Returning, what were you thinking of?" She considered the question carefully. "Not of you," she said gently. "But not without you either." He nodded, understanding. "That's fair." She stepped closer, close enough to notice the change in him. He was quieter now, not cautious, just present. There was no performance.
No waiting for que.
Just a man who had finally learned how to be alone without being empty. And a woman who had learned how to love without disappearing. "I'll see you around," she said. "I hope so," he replied. Then she turned and walked away. Not because she was leaving, but because some beginnings require space to unfold. That winter, Anna's painting Returning was selected for a traveling exhibit on resilience. She wrote a short piece to accompany it. It read, "There are some storms you survive by holding tight. Others, by letting go. And some, by learning to dance in the rain. This piece is for all the versions of ourselves we've had to outgrow, and the quiet, fierce grace of choosing to begin again." She never mentioned Daniel by name. But in every brushstroke, in every color layered over another, he was there. Not as a wound, but as part of the weather that had shaped her. And perhaps somewhere in another town, in another room filled with jazz and notebooks, Daniel would read those words. And smile. Knowing that even if they never found their way back to what they had been, they had arrived at something more important. Who they had become.